From the television studios of North Carolina A&T State University, this is TRC Talk, a cable access show presented by the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Welcome to TRC Talk. I'm your host, Myra Sherd. Today's guest is Cynthia Brown, one of the commissioners for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Welcome, Cynthia, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Well, we're going to start today's show by talking a little bit about your background and what you bring to the commission. I understand that you are the CEO of the Sojourner Group. Is this correct?
I certainly am. It's an organizational development organization working primarily with nonprofits, and I am the founder and lead consultant.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about that group so that we can get the audience affiliated with what you're doing.
Well, it is very consistent with my background. I have for 20 years worked with nonprofits dealing with social justice issues, primarily focused on economic justice, workers' rights, workers' conditions, and dealing with battered women's issues. And so many of the groups that I work with are grassroots community groups working on a range of social justice issues, helping them with program planning, strategic planning, board development, a range of topics that would help strengthen their organizations.
I understand that you're from Reedsville. Now, does that bring the local piece home for you working with the commission, or how did you get involved with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission here?
Well, the fact that Reedsville is in proximity to Greensboro means that Greensboro has always been an extension of the community I come from, but I would say that my involvement with the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission probably began before I was selected as a commissioner, in part because I had become a part of the National Advisory Committee of the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Project, and because of having attended one meeting and having met some of the people connected with the project, I think someone felt comfortable enough with me as a possible commissioner to nominate me in that selection process.
Well, we're trying to get all of the Greensboro community aware of what goes on or what has gone on with the seating of the commission. Now, could you take us back to the project before actually there was a commission?
Well, I was not very involved with the project. What I know is that the project was formed and then decided that they thought that the commission process, or Truth and Reconciliation process, would be a good process to look at the context, look at the sequence of events on November 3rd, 1979, and also to explore the implications of November 3rd and those events and sequence of activities that led up to November 3rd, 1979. So while I'm not as familiar with the project, what I'm very clear about is the mandate that they gave us as a commission once we were selected.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the mandate and what you
Well,
do
the
there?
mandate really speaks to the fact that they wanted an objective body that was selected by, there was a selection panel. I think that they got nominations of over 60 potential commissioners. This selection panel was a cross-section of the community nominated by various organizations who, separate and apart from the project, discussed who potential commissioners would be and then reduced those 60 plus nominees to 7 commissioners. And the mandate says that there are clearly things that have happened in the community that contributed to this tragic event of 5 people being killed at Morningside on November 3rd. And so the issue is, what was the context? What were the things that were happening in this community with the people who were players in that day? What exactly happened on that day? So the mandate for the commission is not only to explore what happened on that day, but to look at what is the context for that? What are the various things that were happening in the community that made this community fertile ground for such an explosion? And then to talk about what are the implications of that? Because ultimately our goal is to come up with recommendations that hopefully will create an environment in this community that will prevent something like that from happening again.
Well, can you tell us how you're getting at the understanding of the context? What methods are you using to get to that information?
We're using several things. There are people who are actually, we have volunteers as well as commissioners and staff who are going door to door knocking on doors of people who live in the Morningside community, residents who happen to still be there even though the housing development has been demolished. There are still people who still live in the vicinity. There's door-to-door knocking where we're talking to people, helping them understand what our mandate is, what our goals are, and trying to talk to them about what they understand. We are having public hearings. We are actually contacting people who we have been told had something to do with the event or who know something about it. So we are taking public statements from people who voluntarily come to us or who are referred to us. And then in addition to door-to-door, taking public statements voluntarily or going out to seek out people who do that, we're having community forums. We've had one with former residents of Morningside. We've had one with people who were a part of the CWP or who were marchers that day. We have had one with people who were former textile workers. And so there are a range of ways. And then we have an office where we have staff where people can feel free to give us a call at any time. There's a number of pieces of literature that has been disseminated to the public so that they are aware how they can contact us.
Well, say I'm a naysayer and I'm just like, well, I'm giving you my statement. What now? What's my statement going to do for the commission?
Well, one of the things that it does is it helps us to understand the various perspectives about this issue. Clearly, there are going to be people who have their own opinion about it, and the commission's goal is to hear the various perspectives from a number of people, and then what may happen is that it may inform, one, our understanding of all of the events and the things that contributed to the day or something about that day, but it also could inform very clearly for us what the recommendations should be that go back out to the community. So I can't guarantee if you give a statement that it will be, quoted in our final report, but certainly any statement that we receive will help broaden our perspective about what actually contributed to this event or what potentially could help prevent it from happening again.
Now, I hear a lot of people saying, well, it's a hearing and they're just going to chop me up. Could you help people be more comfortable participating in the public hearings?
Well, I think that's an excellent question because I think one of the things that's quite different about this process, but very consistent, it's different from what people think of as a hearing because of the kind of judicial perspective on that, but it is quite consistent with what other Truth and Reconciliation Commissions have done because the public hearing offers an opportunity for people who have already given public statements to be selected as a speaker and to present a public statement to the public in this setting. So what I'm saying to you is that there will not be people who are making presentations who have not already given us public statements. And so if we've already received a statement, we understand because of what they have to share that it will help broaden people's perspective, give us the widest view on what is being discussed. Then we will ask that person to come to this public hearing and make a statement. Now, once they come and they make this statement, we will only be asking clarifying questions. We will not be attacking anybody. We won't be challenging anybody. We want to just make sure that, for example, we have received a statement. We understand the various points that this person wants to convey and what we'd like the public to understand about the perspective that they're bringing. We would ask questions to ensure that perhaps they're nervous when they share their information. Perhaps it's unclear to the public what it is that they're sharing. We would ask clarifying questions to help allow them to expand on what it is that they're going to talk about. And the public hearings are shaped in a way that they follow our mandate, so that the first public hearing says what brought us to November 3rd, 1979. So the questions we would ask would make sure that people were being as clear as possible about what they think helped contribute to the November 3rd tragedy.
Have you gotten a lot of response from Nazi Klan people, or not just the participants, but from that community?
We have not. We have not, and it is a grave concern of all of ours because we continue to hear people say that we're only going to hear one perspective. We encourage anybody, whether they're from the Nazi Klan community, whether they're from the church community, whether they're from the CWP, anybody who has views on this, this series of things that we're investigating, we'd like to hear from, but we have not heard very much. We have some potential contact people. We have people who are working on doing outreach to the Klan Nazi community. We have actually had some postings on Klan Nazi websites, but beyond that, I don't think that we have. I think that there are a couple of people, maybe a former Klan Nazi member, who have considered giving statements. So we have some potential entree, but in terms of an enormous response, no, we haven't received that.
Do you think some of that could be backlash from the prosecutions that are taking place now on things that have gone on in the past? Do you think that the Klansmen are upset or concerned that there may be some kind of prosecution?
To be honest with you, that is a fair assumption maybe, but I wouldn't make that conclusion. I think that there are a range of things that are contributing to it, including the fact that it was 25 years ago and nobody wants to even try to deal with that, given that they feel that it has been dealt with and that it doesn't need to be raised anymore. So I won't assume. I can speculate possibly that has contributed to that, but I'm not sure.
Will there be prosecutions that arise from this?
As far as our power, we don't have the subpoena power, and we don't have the power to do any prosecutions. And so our role will not be to take on any kind of prosecution. Our goal will primarily be as I've laid it out before.
Now, what do you think the implications are globally for our commission here in Greensboro?
Well, I think that it's great, and partly because what it says here in the United States with this first Truth and Reconciliation Commission is that it's okay to examine our past as a way of thinking about how we move forward in our future. And I think that not only for the nation, for the globe, for people outside of this country, but also for us in this country, we are going to have a model for how you can engage, disparate parts of the community in a process to look at the various perspectives that contribute to various injustices, not just here, but in other parts of the world. But know that this is the first here in the United States, but there are a number of Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that have happened all over the globe. And so we join a number of other Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in terms of sharing a potential process for examining past injustices or past, tragedies in communities.
I understand that you went through a process to be selected as a commissioner, but once you became a commissioner, was there any specific kinds of trainings that you had to go through in order to get to, quote, the truth?
Well, it's interesting that you should ask that question. I would suggest that this process is an ongoing training. I think that, we've had trainings on how to take statements so that you're being as objective as possible. You're not inferring things. You're not leading people who you're taking statements from. We've had various site visits from former Truth and Reconciliation representatives from Peru and from other countries. And so having had the experience of talking to other people about just how you set up a commission, how you select staff, what are appropriate, structures, infrastructure for your commission is some of the training that we've had. But the reality is we are a commission of 7 people who many of us come from very different backgrounds. There is someone who is from India, traditional from India. There are 3 African Americans, and then there are 3 whites. And we have had a wide range of experiences. And so part of what we are continually exploring is the self-transformation that we must engage in as a part of our work, because it is a challenge to get with people who have a range of perspectives to discuss an issue that is loaded with as much as this process is loaded with. The incident, we are talking about issues connected to labor. to workers' rights, and we're talking about issues connected to communism, an issue that is something that this country has struggled with for a long time. Issues connected to class and race, the Klan, Nazis. I mean, anytime you are exploring a process that is to seek truth in the midst of all of those issues, it gets very complex. And so to have 7 people who come from very different perspectives exploring challenging issues like that, I would say that we are in ongoing training.
Definitely, I can understand that. Now, say I have a student that was born November the 3rd, 1980. How do I get and mobilize the youth? I know you have a strong young following, but how do I mobilize the youth? And more importantly, how do I mobilize young African Americans to get involved with this process?
I think that it's important that young people have an opportunity to see some of the videos that speak about that period of time. I think it's important for them to have a chance to connect with people who were involved. I mean, you could have them to come to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission office. I think that there are a number of things that you could say to them, but I think interacting with people who are engaged in this process, helping them understand that one of the things we're exploring is how is it that these issues are relevant for today? And certainly in this political and economic climate, issues around workers, issues around organizing, issues about the role of government, what potential challenges you might face in terms of dealing with becoming an activist in your community. All of those are things that I would think are important to youth in general and African American youth in particular. So to the extent that they have an interest in any of those issues and having conversations with them that helps you understand that interest, then connecting them to this process as a potential way to explore deeper some of the kinds of concerns that they have on those issues.
Well, now, it sounds all very well put together and could be intimidating to some people. Could you open your arms and welcome everybody in and tell them what they can do as a public to be involved?
Well, I think that the first thing that's important is that people should be willing to make a telephone call to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission office to get an appointment to talk with people about what they may know. Because one of the things that I'm finding is that there are a number of people who know something either about what contributed to it or something about what has happened since, but they don't realize it. And so just having an opportunity to talk to people to explore whether or not they have something to offer, even if they think that they don't. If there were people who lived actually in the Morningside community, for example, I think it is absolutely crucial that we hear from them, because I think that we have had one public forum where people participated, but we did not have as broad a group as we would like, as much as we appreciated what we heard. So to the extent there are people who have anything to offer or who think that they may but are not sure, I would invite them to just give us a call. In terms of the churches, I think it is absolutely important that ministers from their pulpit endorse a truth and reconciliation process, regardless to their own personal feelings. We are in a process where we're trying to hear from a number of people, and oftentimes our religious leaders from the synagogues, the mosques, the churches can say to their parishioners, to their followers, this is something important. Try to give people the encouragement to be a part of this process. I think that if there are people who have time to volunteer to help provide support in the office, we can always use an extra pair of hands in terms of our preparation for the public hearings, having volunteers who can help, to support us in carrying out the public hearings, helping to usher people, into the process, helping to knock doors, to take public statements. There are a range of things that people could do to support this process. And so I just encourage that they give us a call so that we can find out what their interests are and match those with what our needs are.
Tell us what you were doing November 3rd, 1979. I understand you were a Bennett Belle during that time.
I actually was, and it's interesting you should ask, because I remember seeing the news story that day. I was a student at Bennett at that time. I was a junior. And I remember thinking that it was horrible that it had happened. And because I knew where Morningside was, I could not even imagine that something that tragic and that terrifying had happened in that close proximity to Bennett College's campus. But frankly, I was not an activist in the sense that I am now, and so I didn't get real involved in the response. And I don't remember the public hearings, which happened my senior year, but I do remember the stories about it and being horrified at the idea that people could be gunned down and attacked in the way that the marchers were that day.
Now, tell us, you say you were not an activist at the time. How did you become this activist that you are today?
Well, I'd say it started when I was a volunteer with the battered women's shelter. And while I started in the direct service side of responding to the needs of battered women and their children, I became involved as an activist probably when I helped to co-found the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and then represented North Carolina in the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And from that experience, I went on to work in economic justice organizations, working on workers' rights and workers' issues, as I've mentioned before. And through all of those experiences, one of the things that became very important to me and what was shaped for me was the importance of people who are disempowered, people who are at the bottom of our economy, organizing themselves and having the organization and the power, the infrastructure to advocate for their own interests. And I think everything that I've done since those early beginnings has been, it has really, guided everything that I've done, those early experiences. And so much of what I do now has to do with strengthening grassroots community people's ability to advocate for their own interests, to have their own voice, to engage with the power structure. And so that in part informs my interest in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because to the extent that what happened on November 3rd is a statement about what happens when people try to speak for themselves or advocate for their interests, to the extent that there are things for us as a community to examine about the role of our various institutions, government, law enforcement, judicial, to the extent that there is something for us to learn about how it is that those institutions can serve the community, not work against the community, to the extent that this process will allow us to explore those kinds of things, as well as inform how people continue to organize themselves for their own interests. That, I think, is why I am involved in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and why I feel very proud to be a part of this process.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. This has been another edition of TRC Talk. We've been in the studio with Commissioner Cynthia Brown. I'm your host, Myra Sherd. And remember, keep seeking truth and working for reconciliation.